So, a disclaimer before I start off this video. This might be my greatest video of all time. So, yeah, and my last disclaimer here is, yeah, as you can see, I have not posted in a couple months. I'm fine and everything. I've been mastering new editing techniques and improving my setup a little bit. And about this video is currently a horrible video. I actually might delete this video pretty soon and might have a good revised version of how to run Flash on every device in a way more stable manner. But other than that, guys, let's get right into it. So, guys, this video will be discussing the history of Windows Longhorn. So, what was Windows Longhorn? Was it ahead of its time? How did Windows Longhorn start? Why did it get reset? In this video, we'll be answering all these questions, guys. So let's get right into it. So, first starting off, what is Windows Longhorn? Well, here's how Longhorn originated. Sometime back in 2002, there was these two mountains in British Columbia. In between it was a bar named Longhorn. On the side there was Whistler, on the other side there was Blackcomb, and in between there was Longhorn. Whistler was the code name for Windows XP. In the middle, it was meant to be Longhorn. Longhorn meant to be a bridge for Blackcomb. And this moves us on to our next thing. What was Blackcomb, and what happened to Blackcomb? You may say that Blackcomb has nothing to do with Longhorn, but it had a little bit. So Blackcomb was meant to be in the next major release of Windows in 2005 after Longhorn released in 2003. Longhorn was initially meant to be a minor release of the OS and only take about 1 to 2 years to be worked on. And over time, as more builds got made of Longhorn, more features got taken out of Blackcomb, more and more features, to the point of where Microsoft shelved Blackcomb entirely and scrapped the entire concept of it. No build of Blackcomb has never been here to this day, because it was scrapped. And this moves on to our next thing. Was Longhorn ahead of its time? Well, there's a lot of viewpoints on this, and this might be our longest part, so let's get right on into it. Was Longhorn ahead of its time? Many people, even including me, think that Longhorn was ahead of its time. Despite its revolutionary features, its high-resolution 3D icons, all of its new applications and programs, and Windows' nice polish with new UI. Despite this may look so appealing, keep in mind that this time was in 2003 to 2004. And when in 2003 to 2004 hardware wasn't always the greatest. It couldn't show high resolution icons with constant animation. It couldn't show awesome backgrounds. It couldn't show polished Windows UI. It wasn't the greatest for everything. And this ultimately leads us into our next part of why Longhorn got reset. So Longhorn reset also comes into with it being ahead of its time. Why did Longhorn get reset? Well, how Longhorn got reset is, over time, as the development team was continuing on Windows, there was an issue. All the development teams weren't really on the same page. This is why every build either had little to nothing or entire drastic changes all of a sudden. And with this came major stability issues with Longhorn, and many bugs coming with the OS, and it got so severe to a point where Microsoft couldn't really fix all these bugs. So as each build went by, it got more and more unstable, to where the last available build of Longhorn became unbootable at first. And at this point, Microsoft had their final build of Longhorn release, build 493. This build was initially labeled as a farewell to Longhorn and a reset into what would be Vista. So before the first Vista builds, there was these builds in between called the Omega 13 builds. These builds were a reset of Longhorn initially. All these builds are exactly identical to XP. The only changes indicating that these are somewhat Longhorn builds is in WinVer, where it shows the symbols LH instead of just Windows XP. But other than that, all these builds were exactly similar to Windows XP. Getting into a couple of the first Vista builds. So these builds were very identical to Longhorn and still identified as Longhorn. They had minor changes here and there, but overall these builds were a bit more stable than Longhorn, but still had their flaws. Microsoft kept on making builds until the point of where no evidence of Longhorn wasn't even left inside these builds. Microsoft kept on going on this point to make Vista. But as the build list grew further and further and the dates got more and more pushed back, Microsoft realized that they were in a problem with Vista and started to work a bit faster on it. As Vista progressed a little bit more faster after each Microsoft event passed, they finally had Vista Beta. They had some people test it, and the reaction wasn't so great for the Vista Beta. But the only issue with this is it was just months before the initial release of Windows Vista, and Microsoft knew they had to move fast. So they made Vista, and they were able to publish it on January 19th, 2007. Vista at first was met with many criticisms, backlash, and many other things. The public was mad at Microsoft. Many people just stuck with XP and never moved on until about Windows 7. And I guess the public did have a right to be angry about this because they've waited 6 years from XP for an OS that was supposed to be revolutionary, where the WoW starts with everything that they saw in Longhorn.